This is not the most fun visit to the hospital I've ever seen. Where did... it said based on a true story, so please tell me what and why and how, because I was so worried about this little girl and her kind of terrible parents, so I'm curious, where did this story come from?
So this is a story that my mom and my grandmother would tell often about an experience that they had when my mom was 4 years old in the early 60s. And basically, I grew up, I was homeschooled on a family compound in rural Oregon, and my grandmother lived next door, as did my great-grandmother and my uncle and great-uncle, and a lot of family, just all together. And my mom decided to homeschool us in the middle of this, and so my grandmother was worried we'd be weird, and she'd come down every day to fix us lunch or check in to make sure we were getting a proper education. And neither my grandmother nor my mom had ever gone to therapy, never wanted to, had never considered it, still don't. And this story would come up often. And it would usually start at lunch, but it was told like a fairy tale. And the lines that are used in the film would be exchanged. I wrote it basically based off of the way that they spoke. So I don't like little girls that cry, the doctor said. So how my mom she just might drop straight into that moment and then tell the rest of the story all the way through. And I wanted to capture sort of the weird fairy book element that happens when people have gone through something very traumatic that they are detached from, but they can't let go. And it was very clear to me, even as a child, my mom would get trapped in the cycle, and it was like, well, drop the needle right in the middle, and here we go. We're going to tell the story again from this point forward until we complete the cycle. And I know a lot of people have the experience of driving around with a grandparent or family member who likes to point out everyone who's died up and down the street. But that was how, like, everything. My grandmother was the funniest person I knew, but she was also extremely dark and macabre. And so she would just, here we go into town. Oh, there's Mr. Tofty. He sold his farm. He died in an accident. And, it was always that kind of thing. Here we go. Yeah, that man lived to be 106. He was dead a long time. What does that mean? And so it took me until I was an adult to realize that this was a true story that actually happened, but that it wasn't funny. It took me a long time to realize it wasn't a funny story, and that it was actually very, very sad and scary, and how much it affected all of us. And it was sort of... I think I wrote it as a bit of a origin tale, almost as a response to the amount of Marvel origins. Like, if I have to see another Spider-Man, I'm going to just tell my origin story, and it happens to be a weird gothic fairy tale where my mom gets disemboweled by the doctor. So that's probably where it really came from.
I want to ask, maybe this is a little bit about your family's history, but little Mata.
Maida.
Little Maida.
Maida. Thank you for correcting. But also, can you explain the origin of Maida and where that country that comes from? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The historical significance of that.
So her name is, this is a really funny, dark other family tale. So she was named after her father's aunt, who had promised to pay for her college. And Maida B. Belding was a twin born in Oklahoma in 1900. And she... her twin died at birth, Maida and Mita, and they were the children of a very wealthy cabinet maker, the Beldings, and I think it was a textile industry family. And so I'm not entirely sure the full origin of where that name came from before, but they were from Oklahoma, and her brother, my grandfather's father, lost all of his inheritance, gambled it away, started a second family. My grandfather was the bastard child of the nanny and landowner. And so when my grandfather was in 6th grade, he was kicked out of his family, had to ride train cars to meet his great aunt in Portland, Oregon, and he worked for her for a very long time. And so when he had a family, she didn't have any children, and she really wanted somebody to be named after her. And she was the kind of woman who had an oil painting we still have of herself that she would gift to us so that we would remember her. She'd apparently only fly on Pan Am and have the red carpet rolled out. She was a very particular, tiny, 5-foot-tall Southern woman. So she paid for this name, but my mom grew up going to visit her in Palm Springs as a little girl. She hated her. It was like she was not nice. She was very particular, did not like children. And so when I didn't like my name, she never liked her name. And then she was 16 years old, and her dad was like, well, you were named after this, and you were supposed to get some college money. She was like, what? I'm supposed to get college money? Well, where is it? Oh, I don't know. She demanded that he write his aunt or ask her for the assistance, and she sent a check, and then immediately called and said, tear that up. I've changed my mind. And so my mom was a bit horrified and determined, and decided to get her dad involved. And she said, I'll buy the land next door as long as we don't have to give the money back. I won't go to college. I'll stay right here and you can have the money, but I want something. And so instead of going to college, my mom took her namesake fund, bought 2 acres on the family compound, and never left. So, I'm sorry, that was a long answer.
Everyone else is dead?
That's true.
She's still there.
She is. She's the last one standing.
When is this movie being made?
Hopefully someday.
As soon as we find some investors.
So I'm so intrigued by your family now. I want to know how y'all got connected and where this project first kind of got kickstarted. How did you actually start making it and getting Eric involved and some of these animators and these puppeteers?
So the story, it's probably one of the first things I told McKenzie on our first date. And he said, oh.
And you fell?
Quite thoroughly. She told me stories about her family within the first 30 minutes of our real first conversation. And I thought, there's a lot more here. Yeah. So she would tell me this story, and the first version that she wrote was a kind of a short story, and then she made a creative deck that had these wonderful images she put together, and we both knew that there was something here.
And I would say we were living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and I really, really, really wanted to get involved in the film community. And we had some wonderful friends who were starting to make short films, and they were involving me in the process. And I was learning a lot about the experience. But I had gone to college and studied journalism and documentary filmmaking, but I had no idea how to translate real stories into narrative. I was really unsure of how to write it. I thought that it was a stop motion project, but I had zero animation experience. And so I decided to wait and put the story to the side, because it was like, the story feels like it's a stop motion project, but I know nothing about that. And I need to learn all about that process first. So we ended up moving to LA, and I worked in a production company for just a year, and it was kind of this crazy ground up. I was supposed to write for them. All of a sudden I'm in the production office doing a little bit of everything, trying to get on sets, trying to work with different talent, and I ended up in a VFX, a really high-end VFX, film finance, production company, blah, 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 only in LA kind of situation, where during the pandemic, Disney Imagineers who had been laid off or put sort of on hold, furloughed for that time, came to work for us, and we were building future city concepts for the world of tomorrow. And the idea was to have all these really high-end VFX artists and prop makers, along with futurists and architects and engineers come up with better visions for integrating technology and all of these ideas, even theme park solutions to moving through spaces, and build these visions and narratives around that. So I was scripting all these different things between people and helping them sort of create these stories. And my boss, who came in the middle of the pandemic, trying to put his kids through college, was like, he had been the executive architect for the Disney Imagineers and had designed the Bible of how Star Wars land and the Galactic Star Cruiser, the hotel, how it would operate, what the look feel was, what the story behind all of the objects, and he would assign sort of the look and feel of everything and connect it back into all of the artwork and designs, and then put it into a practical, functional capacity. So everybody who worked on the project had this document to look at and align their designs with, so that it would all fit together seamlessly. And he took me through how he did that, and he was such a giving person. His name is Greg Ashton, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And basically, it was like, I know you want to make some films. There's a lot of people who love stop motion, because I was starting to work on just like some of the concept illustrations with our producer. And he was like, did you know that Jason also wants to be in film? And I was like, well, but Jason designed Guardians of the Galaxy theme park. Like, why would he care about my tiny little stop motion project on the side? And he was like, he wants to be a set designer. You should talk to him. And so I went and I was like, Jason, Greg said that you might want to do this. He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And so he would stay on Zoom calls well into 10 p.m. because we had a crazy job. And we would be there and we would be sending ideas back and forth. And I just learned through this job how to even put these things together. So it was really fun to then take what I was doing for work and translate it into model making. And then he had all this experience with model makers. So then, because they had also been furloughed, they were like, let's just reach out to Michael. Michael used to travel with the Disney castle all over the world, the original 1950s. And like, you know what? He is kind of close to retiring, but also everybody at the model shop is working from home. So they have everything they need. And I just have a feeling you should call him. I was like, I just call him? You're not going to call him for me? No, just call him. Here's his phone number. Call him. And so we did. We called, and Michael's the sweetest man on earth. And he said, I've always wanted to do a stop motion. And he immediately invited us up to see his studio. He has a laser cutter where he builds things, and he was so excited about the idea of making the hospital, and he saw Jason's floating concept that we'd kind of built together, and he was like, this is easy. I got this. And so and the other fabricator, Mukhtar, had also been working in like the stone carving department. They call it, I forget what it is, the official term, but at Disney, they have specialists who carve all of the stonework for the theme park so that it looks accurate to the region it's supposed to be. And he was like the top stone guy. And they're like, he's got the house.
So, missing link here is our other producer, Charles Piper.
Yes.
So as we finished the creative deck and we're deciding we should make it as a stop motion, we talked to our friend who had a background in stop motion, and he kind of guided us through the building blocks of how that works. And, you know, we both worked on enough projects outside that we knew how production worked, basically, and how to finish something. And then he connected us and found how to hire the character designer, storyboard artist, and the fabricator and animator, Eric Oxford, who was really, I mean...
pivotal. I mean, we would not have pivotal. Amazing puppets. Eric and Ange Cox, they are the reason we have stunning hand-carved representations of my family. Charlie also brought us our amazing illustrator who made all of the posters and artwork, the interstitial pieces, Chris Alsop, who I love to call my dear disgruntled UK librarian who has the craziest amount of talent, just off in the middle of nowhere, UK.
So we got the characters designed, we got the storyboards put in, we created an animatic, and then we got to work building sets and building the puppets and putting the shooting schedule. And stop motion is incredibly slow. And
it took about 3 months to do the main fabrication from the moment we decided, yes, we could do this. And it had started, I would say, July 2020. There was like a confluence of events, but my new boss was like, I think you can have these people help you. I think they'd love to do it. Charlie said, yes, it is a stop motion. I think we can find the right people. We met everyone within 2 weeks of that. By early August, we were just running. And then
we started animating in December, and it was about 6 months of animation.
January. We took photos in December.
That's right. So it was about 5 months of animation, and then we finished in the summer of 2021.
And really, Eric, who did all of the primary fabrication and animation, if he did not live in this brewery arts community, very, very close to us, where he could live and work in the same space, we would not have been able to make the project at all, because he was able to house the set in the bottom part of his loft. And then the other fabricator, Ange, lived across the way and had her partner Billy had a metal shop and a wood shop. So we were able to do everything safely, socially distanced, but also in confined bubble, because they were already in a bubble together. And then he was able to do so much of the work right there. So like the house was carved in Mukhtar's bathroom in a studio apartment in the middle of Los Angeles, and every little piece was done remotely in people's homes. And no one met each other until this year, when it was finally safe.
Yeah, it was a very small production crew. Our DP, Eric and Tiffany, would get together every 2-3 days to set up the next shot, usually at night.
I was there maybe 3 times a day between work.
Yeah.
It got crazy.
Yeah.
As far as the look, was it based on a photo that you gave them and they were able to go from there? Did they meet your mom? Just to get the look? I mean, where did this exact look come from?
So one of the things that was great about working with a lot of visual artists is that I'd basically been sort of training in the background to do a lot of art direction for a long time. So one of the beauties of stop motion and animation in general is the amount of control. And so I had put together several comprehensive lookbooks for that, with photographs, archival photographs, but also children's stories. We had found a lot of great hospital footage from amazing documentaries like Frederick Weissman's Hospital.
And the title of the film came from a children's book that you found.
Yes, and it was like a 1950s book helping children understand what it meant to go to the hospital. And so it was really fun. It was sort of this collage art book of this is the world. And then I worked with everyone to do designs. Like Ange had helped with some of the early concept art, and then that evolved with Jackie, who did the character designs, and then
Jackie Cadiente did the initial character sketches, which we then handed to the fabricators, and they got to work. But then Chris Elsop, our illustrator in the UK, started doing concept illustrations.
Well, he would illustrate the photographs that we would send as they were carving, and then they would change the carving to match, because then he was looking at a real photograph and their just carvings, and then it was the luxury of time. You never would get to do this any other way, and I don't think you'd really get to do it even if you had all of the experience in the world. Because I tend to be very collaborative in the sense that, like, I have a vision and it's pretty specific, but there's a lot of room, and everybody brought something. Eric would bring such fun movements and like spirit to all of the characters, but we would have these really funny debates about like would her, like, stop motion has this herky-jerky quality that's really fun. But I was like, is it like that? Or is it more,
Because stop motion has evolved a lot over the last 70, 100 years and can now be so smooth and perfect looking, almost like it's CG animation. But we didn't quite want that look. We actually wanted a feeling of the handmade and the jangly quality.
Well, and it was so important too. Like, I get really excited by era-specific details. And so, 1963, Rankin and Bass, those holiday specials, that kind of look that leads historically to Nightmare Before Christmas. The man who animated my mom's guts in the claymation sequence, he worked on Nightmare Before Christmas. He lives in our neighborhood. We met him because Charlie was like, I follow Rich on Twitter, and I think he'd be willing to maybe do this. We should reach out. I was like,
something old, something new, something borrowed. I mean, every great, I think, the film having a mixture of new, hungry, discovering talent, as well as people who've done it a lot. That actually was a combination of all of those things that made this project.
And then a lovely narrator as well.
oh.
Can we talk about your narrator?
Yeah, Lucia.
Lucia Hadley Wheeler is the daughter of a dear friend in Portland who is a poet, and his wife is a lawyer, and they are just the most wonderful human beings. And they only speak to their children in Polish and Spanish. So the kids are very, very, very well-spoken, 3 languages at the age of 5. And we had been struggling with the narration because when I wrote it, I intended it for the narrator to be an adult who would do the voices, because that's how my mom would recount and read aloud to us as children. And I wanted to kind of capture that, but it wasn't really working. And I have a friend who is in development at Disney, and she was like, have you thought about bringing in a child actor? And I was like, wow, I love children in film, but a lot of child actors, kind of like a lot of modern musicals, there's just this polished thing. And I was like,
that real children do not have.
And we're like, we want a real child, like a child who sounds like they are lost in the magic of storytelling and play. And so while we were sitting there like, what are we going to do? How are we going to cast this voice? Van sent you a poem.
He loves to incorporate his children in his art making, and so he had one of his contemporary art poems read by his daughter, and he had sent that to me, and I just put it up against picture, and all of the missing pieces just came together in that experience. So then he guided her through a bunch of short, whenever you want to go out and play, we're done sessions, and guided her through the script up in Portland, and sent me the audio, and then I cut together the performance from all of these sessions. And she was such a inquisitive, present. She was playful, trying to come up with her own characters, not actually even prompted. She really just kind of was playing in like it was a play set.
And Van is so great because the way that he plays with the children, language is just fun. And so the way that she's wrapping her mouth around hemostatic forceps, that is just something that I've always loved about his work in particular. So there is this playfulness and in a sense leaning into the imperfection of how we communicate, and it just felt like it was magical to see that. And it was like, that's my mom, and that's the sort of soul that of the narrative that pulls you through this otherwise kind of bleak fairy tale.
If it was an adult, the bleakness would have always been there. The fact that it's her saying these things, the innocence bleeds through so well. It was what brought me straight into it. Her way of saying words was fascinating. Yeah. So cool to hear that she's a multilingual little child. That's adorable.
With a perfect smoky voice. I mean, don't we all want that kind of a voice?
How we create that may be different, but I love that. Gosh, that's incredible. you brought up the little details, and we can see it in the dolls that you brought, but in the film there are just little touches like the ambulance with the light blinking when it's going down the thing. I talked about the magazine, but the little touches in this type of form of art is so... Normally it's not as... It can be lost. You guys have given us something that can really visually be kept with us. How important was those little small things? How deep did you dive with each little thing little thing on each element?
Well, here's the thing about working with Tiffany Kimmel as a director. There are lots of details, and you won't always understand why they're there, but eventually the story comes out. If this thing that's on the wall, well, the reason why that's there is because one time I saw this thing. Her references aren't purely cinematic, or I saw this film that had this. It's all kind of drawn from life. And then the other wonderful thing is that she doesn't overcomplicate in a scenario. If you have a wonderful detail, and then you have a lot of extra wonderful details happening in the same time, they're all competing for the same space. And you can trust the space where you don't need much. The characters don't need to move constantly. They can stand still, because it's actually really powerful when something stands still and only moves a little bit. And instinctively, she seemed to know how to do that and directed the crew towards that.
I bleed personal, so everything is personal, and it's just how it is. It was really important to me to also bring little things of levity to the different scenes. So I knew that we would never really see any of the posters on the wall in the waiting room, but it was also just critical that they have these dark jokes within them, so that there would just be that sense of, wait, is that a little boy with a bunch of knives in him? What's going on over there? It just, in that way that when you watch something that is demanding something of you, that there's, if you need a moment of escape, it's there. It's just there. It's in the frame.
You reward us. It was rewarding to look for little things. I was finding myself, I can hear her, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Yeah, thank you. It's a wild thing to do as a filmmaker. I've got to ask one of those particular things. When they're in the waiting room, the father is smoking. And that's one of the great... Oh, the mother's smoking.
They're both smoking. The mom has the beautiful point.
She does.
Can you talk a bit about that scene? Because I thought that was so cool, and it gave it kind of a time setting, which I thought was really unique, just by the way they're smoking and the look of them smoking. I was like, well, that's certainly not today, you know?
Oh, yeah. We don't smoke in hospitals anymore.
Or on planes. Like, I was like, this is the same concept of seeing like an ashtray on a plane film, like in Airplane.
Oh, I love Airplane.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is with the decision of not having their mouths move, this is the brilliance of Eric Oxford as an animator, is he managed to extract the character and the emotional expression through physical gestures, not facial expressions. And most human beings, we connect through the facial expressions, but so much communication happens. Every article that's like, all of the body language you can tell of who's a psychopath based on how, that really comes across through gestures. And there's nothing like a tool. I mean, I could sit here and pretend to be talking and taking a moment and thinking.
So
and absolutely. And
it changes my perspective of you just by doing that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden, so casual.
Here's the stop motion secret about why it looks so cool. So in stop motion, you can shoot on ones or twos. So film is usually 24 frames per second. So a big budget stop motion film is going to be animated where there is one photograph per frame, 24 images, where a former version of stop motion, they shoot it on twos, it is 2 photographs per so it's 12 frames per second. It gives it that slightly jangly look. So it doesn't move as smoothly. And so we have a relationship with the medium, and so we get to know how stop motion looks, and it gives it that look. But the brilliance of Eric in that sequence is they are moving every other frame, but the cigarette smoke is moving every single frame. So the cigarette smoke has this fluidity to it and this kind of magic, while the characters are still operating as you've been seeing them in the film.
And I think he also made sure that in that it built and built and built so that you felt the weight of the cloud of smoke as well. And he was so excited to play in that space, which was really fun, because he was like, I want to try this. And I was like, I don't know how it's going to work. I have an idea, but I'm not sure. And it was so fun to see him come up with these sort of amazing workarounds when the doctor is knocking her out for the first time and putting on the gas mask, and you're watching her eyes flutter. We had been trying so many different things to achieve that effect, and it wasn't working. We were running out of time. We were all really stressed. And we show up because we have to switch sets, and we only have X amount of time. And he's still in the back, and we kind of peek around the corner, and he's got a curtain and he's crunching it over the camera. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, just trust me. And it was perfect. It had that sensation of being drugged while not being a literal eye blink, but it created that same effect. It was like, this is what's so fun about the play part of stop motion and even our own craziness.
What did it mean for you guys to get this film into Tallgrass, and knowing that this is a festival that is about the filmmaker? Coming to Tallgrass, that decision, how important was that because of getting into this festival?
Well, our dear friend Eliza at SAG Indie in LA had said, this is one of my favorite festivals. They take care of filmmakers.
You will leave there with friends.
You will leave there.
She emphasized you will make friends that you will have for a very long time at this festival, and that was very important to us.
Yeah. Well, and this is our first thing that we have made that is ours from start to finish. And, we both worked on lots of other people's projects over the years, and we love doing that. But it was really exciting to take that experience and try something that was a little crazy, that wouldn't have existed without COVID. I would have never learned how to animate and sit there with Eric and position dolls and place all. I decorated all of it myself. I was like, it's gonna be here, and would not have done that otherwise.
And the only way out is through. And we picked a project that had so many other people involved that we had to finish. I've been telling people, learn how to finish something before you learn how to finish something good, because you will get better automatically, but if you never learn to finish, you'll never finish. And that's so key. And so we learned to finish things before we did this project, and we felt that pressure of like, we can't not finish this.
So when we got word that we were going to be able to come to Tallgrass, we already knew if we get in, we have to go.
We will be there. And
we've never been to the Midwest and always wanted to come. So it was just sort of a beautiful timing. Really.
And literally the first humans we interacted with as we got here late on Thursday night, people were coming out of an event that was done, and they said, hi, welcome, come with us, we're going over here. And it was just like, oh, okay, we're at the right festival.
You also got called out from the stage for your cool glasses right when we walked into karaoke, and they were like, you must be pretty cool. And we're like,
I was going to ask where you guys purchase your glasses. You both have cool glasses, but McKenzie's are...
a wonderful woman.
Gagosha Optique. It sounds like a made-up name, but it's her family name in LA. And we walked in, and Tiffany was determined to help me find something that made my face a little less miscellaneous.
I don't think his face is miscellaneous. He thinks his face is miscellaneous.
I like the word, though, to use it for the description. So it begs the question, what's next? Can we see something more like this? But what is next for you guys?
Well, I am in the post-production on a documentary feature about religious exemptions at Christian campuses, and it's a totally different complicated world.
Fascinating.
No puppets.
And so there's that hopefully will finish this year or early next year.
What schools are can I ask what schools are you looking at going to, or?
It's all filmed.
It's all filmed. We went to BYU, Baylor. Okay. We went to Oklahoma, Pepperdine. We interviewed a professor at Oklahoma State who had been at I think Liberty. We talked to all sorts of people all over the country. Seattle Pacific.
Wow.
A lot of schools. We filmed in probably. There was a character, a childhood friend of mine, who is sort of leading this legal action, and he went looking to meet with all of his plaintiffs, and so he drove across 30 states in the height of the pandemic to meet with them to put this class action lawsuit together, and also sort of kickstart relationships at all of these campuses. So it's a big project.
Well, like I live in Dallas, so Baylor's just south of us, SMU. I mean, there's so many.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a huge deal. People don't even know. Yeah. I love that you're doing this.
Yeah, they don't know. It's crazy. So that's been a long, ongoing project, too. We started with, about a decade ago, just doing oral histories because these stories are not getting told. And he had been sent to reparative therapy or gay conversion therapy while at George Fox University for 2 years. And he was my brother's college roommate. And so he worked for every conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., and then had a nervous breakdown from this process and had to come to terms with who he really was and then go back and try to fight for these students. So that's what the documentary really is about. It's like these students now are taking off and creating spaces where they're trying to fight back and also trying to alert people, hey, your taxpayer dollars are going to scholarships to these universities that are actively harming us. And they're kicking us out, or they're getting other students to rat on them. There's a lot of monitoring people's computers and cell phones and social media, and it's really intense.
Even just having internet access, something they can turn off. It's like foreign countries we hear about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We were trying to get Paul to smoke on screen just for dramatic effect, but no. And the next, in terms of an animated project, is called Heads, and it is written by our wonderful illustrator, Chris Alsop. And so we're in pre-production. We've got the story with the animatic begun, and we have the script, and so we're in the process of raising money because while it was fun to do once, we don't want to do that a second time. And we think that we've put together a really wonderful team that I think we'll be able to find people who want to join in on the next experience. Yeah.
So we're kind of doing that. And then I'm also just a writer in general. So I'm actively trying to pitch scripts and a graphic novel also with the same illustrator. You know, once you meet your people, you just want to keep making things. So we just want to keep making things and finding the right medium for the right story. That's a big thing for both of us. Yeah. Because this story would not have been made this way if it wasn't important to the kind of story. The way that my mom would reenact it, it was very much like playing with her dolls. And I thought, I know that I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out because that's...
You can learn how to do anything.
If it's appropriate for the story, it will work.
I completely agree. And as someone who gets to watch all this stuff, I can't wait to see what's coming. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. I want to give you the last word.
It'll be our little secret.